Okay, so have you ever walked into a room after like a deep clean and it just looks spotless?
Yeah.
But what if I told you there's this whole other level of clean that we just can't see?
Right.
Like a microscopic world that determines if a surface is truly clean, not just visually.
Yeah, it's like this. You wouldn't eat a piece of food just because it looks shiny and red,
Right,
right?
right,
You'd want to know where it came from, how it was handled.
right.
And it's the same with cleaning, especially after things like floods, biohazards,
Yeah.
mold, all that.
So we're talking about those situations where you really need to be sure, not just assume.
Absolutely.
So what exactly are we diving into today?
Today we're going deep into cleaning verification, making sure things are really clean.
Okay.
And we're focusing on two powerful disinfectants, hydrogen peroxide and chlorine dioxide.
I've used hydrogen peroxide before, but chlorine dioxide sounds a lot more intense.
Yeah, it definitely packs a punch, and we'll get into when and how to use each one later.
Okay.
But first, imagine you've got water damage in your basement.
Mm-hmm.
Burst pipe, things got soaked. You call the pros, they dry everything. It looks good on the surface.
Right.
But how do you really know those surfaces are clean and safe?
That's a good question.
That's where these verification techniques come in.
So it's like having a cleaning detective toolkit
Yeah,
to
exactly.
make sure things are truly clean.
Exactly.
And we've got an excerpt from Testing Cleanliness and Restoration and Cleaning to guide us today.
Yeah, great source of information.
I hear it's got some pretty surprising stuff in there.
It really does.
So where do we even begin with this whole invisible world of cleaning?
Well, a good place to start is with handheld testing devices.
Okay.
These give you on-the-spot readings, like instant results for cleanliness.
Oh, like those instant read thermometers you use for cooking.
Exactly like that.
You just poke it in and boom. If your food is cooked through.
Exactly.
This sounds way more high tech, though.
It's pretty cool.
So tell me more.
So picture this. You're a cleaning pro.
Right.
You've just disinfected a surface.
Okay.
And you want to be sure you didn't miss any spots. So you pull out your ATP meter.
ATP meter.
Yeah, it stands for adenosine triphosphate.
Okay. Hold up. Adenosine try what? Now break that down for me.
Right. So ATP, it's like the energy currency of all living cells. If something's alive, it's got ATP.
Interesting.
And these meters are super sensitive. They could detect even tiny traces of it on surfaces.
Wow. So the lower the ATP reading, the cleaner the surface.
You got it. It's like a cleanliness score.
I like it.
And there are different types of ATP meters. Some are more sensitive than others, depending on the situation.
Oh, okay.
Like you'd use a more sensitive one in a hospital operating room than, say, a restaurant kitchen.
Right. That makes sense.
But they all work on the same principle, detecting ATP, to give you a snapshot of the cleanliness level.
So some popular brands I've heard of are the 3M Clean Trace and Hygiena and SureTouch. Are those the ones you mean?
Those are the big players, yeah.
Okay.
You see them everywhere in the industry.
So I'm picturing cleaning crews now armed with these futuristic devices, zapping surfaces and instantly knowing if they need to go back over any spots.
That's a pretty accurate picture, actually.
Are there any other tools like this in the cleaning detective toolkit?
There's another one called UV fluorescence testing. Have you ever seen those black lights they use at clubs,
Oh, yeah.
where you can suddenly see every spilled drink on the floor?
Yeah, it's pretty eye-opening.
That's exactly what this is like.
Really?
You apply a special marker before cleaning that glows under UV light, and if after cleaning you still see glowing spots, those areas weren't properly cleaned.
So it's like a hidden mess detector.
Pretty much.
But you said these handheld devices are just the first line of defense.
That's right.
What happens when you need to be absolutely sure, like in a hospital setting?
Yeah, good point. They can't just rely on a handheld device for something that critical.
Exactly.
That's when you bring in lab testing for the really in-depth analysis.
Lab testing. So it sounds like we're talking about like full-on microscopic CSI for cleanliness now.
Yeah, exactly. Those handheld devices are like the first responders.
Yeah.
Give you that quick assessment on the scene. But lab testing, that's the full report, the in-depth analysis.
Okay, so walk me through it. How does this lab verification process actually work?
Okay, so let's stick with that water damage example we were talking about before, right?
Yeah.
So after the initial cleanup, the technician is going to take swabs from different surfaces around your basement.
Okay.
And those swabs, they're basically acting like tiny little evidence collectors, picking up anything microscopic that might be hanging around.
Oh, wow.
Then those swabs get sent off to a lab to be analyzed.
So not just any lab, though, right?
Right, these are specialized labs that are equipped to do this kind of microscopic detective work. They can pinpoint exactly what you're dealing with, like specific types of bacteria, fungi, E. coli, black mold. The stuff you really don't want hanging around your home.
Yeah, definitely not. So
Exactly.
you get the lab results back. Hopefully it's all good news, but what if it's not? What happens then?
That's where those lab results are so valuable because they're going to tell you exactly what you're dealing with, which means you can use the right solution. You know, it might mean you need additional cleaning. You might need a different kind of disinfectant, or maybe there's some kind of underlying moisture issue that needs to be addressed.
Right, because I imagine even the most thorough cleaning in the world isn't going to help if you've got some hidden moisture problem that's just inviting all that microscopic stuff to come right back.
Exactly. You're exactly right. Moisture is a breeding ground for mold and bacteria. It's like their ideal environment.
Right.
So even if you've cleaned and disinfected a surface, if there's still moisture hanging around,
Yeah.
you haven't really solved the problem.
So it's like thinking you've cleaned up a spill, but then realizing you missed a spot and now everything's sticky and gross again.
Pretty much.
Okay, so how do you even detect moisture that you can't see? Is there like a special tool for that too?
Yeah, there are actually. There are these things called moisture meters and thermohygrometers.
What?
They're the go-to tools. They measure the moisture levels inside materials, the humidity in the air, even the temperature, because all of that can affect how easily mold and bacteria can grow.
Wow. It's kind of amazing how much detail goes into making sure that something is really, truly clean. It's like we're uncovering this whole invisible world that most people don't even think about.
I know, it's fascinating, and it really highlights why it's so important to have established protocols for all this, especially when you're using powerful disinfectants like hydrogen peroxide and chlorine dioxide.
Right, because those aren't the kind of things you just want to be using without knowing what you're doing.
Exactly.
So what kind of protocols are we talking about here?
Well, one of the most important things is dilution. You can't just grab a bottle of hydrogen peroxide or chlorine dioxide and start spraying everywhere.
Less is more in this case.
Sometimes, yeah. It really depends. You can't use too high of a concentration because that can actually be ineffective and even dangerous. You have to dilute it properly based on what you're cleaning, the type of surface, how contaminated it is, all that.
It's like baking. You wouldn't use a whole bag of baking soda in a cake and hope for the best.
Exactly. It's all about precision. Using these disinfectants effectively means following the guidelines really carefully.
Mm.
And another important thing is dwell time.
Dwell time. What's that? Like giving the cleaning products a little break?
Yeah, you could say that basically is the amount of time that the disinfectant needs to actually stay wet on the surface to do its job to kill all those little microscopic guys.
Oh, so you can't just like spray and wipe.
Nope. You got to let it sit there and work its magic.
So how long are we talking? What's
And
a typical dwell time?
It really depends on the product you're using and the concentration. But in general, hydrogen peroxide usually needs about 5 to 10 minutes of dwell time, while chlorine dioxide often needs even longer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it can be a whole process.
So we've got dilution dwell time. Anything else to keep in mind?
Training and certification are super important. You want to make sure that the people who are handling these chemicals really know what they're doing, both for their own safety and for whoever's going to be in that space afterwards.
Right. So it's not just about knowing how to clean. It's knowing how to clean safely and effectively.
Exactly.
Are there organizations that kind of set these standards and do training for this?
Yeah, for sure. There's CARSI, the Cleaning and Restoration Science Institute.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that name before. What's their deal?
They've been around for almost 30 years, and they're basically the leaders in setting standards for the industry.
Wow, 30 years. That's a long time. So they're kind of like the scientific backbone of the cleaning and restoration industry, making sure that everything is on the up and up.
Yeah, you could say that. They do a ton of scientific research.
Yeah.
They develop training programs. They're really invested in making sure that the industry is using the best and safest practices.
That's really cool. I had no idea there was so much science involved in cleaning.
It's way more than just soap and water.
Definitely. So we've talked about a lot, we've talked about tools and protocols and organizations, but let's bring it back to those two disinfectants, hydrogen peroxide, chlorine dioxide.
Okay.
How do you know which one to use when?
That's a great question. And it really depends on the situation. Each one has its own strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, so it's time for a cleaning showdown. Hydrogen peroxide versus chlorine dioxide. Let's do it. All right, let's get ready to rumble. It's time for the ultimate cleaning face-off, hydrogen peroxide versus chlorine dioxide. Who's gonna win?
Well, there's not really a winner or loser. It's more about choosing the right tool for the job.
Right, okay, so let's break it down. When would you use hydrogen peroxide?
So hydrogen peroxide, that's kind of your go-to for everyday cleaning and restoration. It's safe for pretty much any environment, homes, hospitals, schools. And a big plus is that it breaks down into water and oxygen.
So no harsh chemical residues,
Exactly.
which is definitely a good thing, especially if you have kids or pets running around.
Absolutely. Now, chlorine dioxide, on the other hand, that's the heavy hitter.
Okay, so when do you bring out the big guns?
We're talking industrial settings, serious contamination, sewage biohazards, when you need some serious cleaning power.
So going back to that water damage example, if that basement flood involves sewage backup, that's when you call in the chlorine dioxide.
Exactly. You need something that can really knock out all those nasty bacteria, viruses, even those tough spores that some of those microorganisms can produce.
So it really is like picking the right tool for the job. You wouldn't use a sledgehammer to crack a nut, right?
Precisely. And that's why those protocols we were talking about earlier are so important. The dilution dwell time training certification. You got to make sure whoever's using these disinfectants knows what they're doing.
Right, because with great cleaning power comes great responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, the biggest takeaway here isn't just knowing the difference between these two disinfectants.
It's about knowing that true clean goes way beyond what you can see.
Absolutely. You've got to be informed. You've got to ask questions and advocate for yourself, whether you're dealing with a contractor after a flood or even just thinking about the cleaning protocols at your kid's school.
It's like we've unlocked this secret level of awareness. We've gone from just blindly trusting that things are clean to being able to really understand what it takes to make a space truly safe.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. And that's what we hope you take away from this deep dive, the knowledge and the curiosity, to keep learning and keep asking questions.
Well said. So the next time I'm in a place that looks spotless, I'm not just going to assume. I'm going to channel my inner cleaning detective and ask myself, how do they know it's truly clean?
There you go.
That's it for this deep dive into the fascinating world of cleaning verification. We've gone from basic observations to high-tech tools and covered this whole microscopic battleground and explored the powerful chemicals that ensure truly clean and safe environments. Until next time, stay curious, everyone.